and welcome to the Scramble. I'm Tommy Lahren. Today's show brings us topics ranging from Obamacare constitutional challenges to automobile recalls and finally that tricky parent-administrator relationship stirring up some controversy right here in the Las Vegas Valley. Before we open the floor for debate, I'd like to take a moment to introduce our panelists. We have Alex Velto, a junior in political science with a minor in Brookings Public Policy. We also welcome Ryan Hamilton, a graduate student in Journalism and Media Studies. We also have Sarah Montez Dioca, also a graduate student in Journalism and Media Studies. And we'd like to welcome Alvin Loy, a senior in Journalism and Media Studies. Thank you all for being here, and let's get to it. Well, I'm sure it comes as no surprise to the panel that the Affordable Care Act, better known as Obamacare, has had its share of controversy. Well, one of the most controversial provisions of the act, the mandate requiring employers to cover contraception, was recently addressed by the Supreme Court. The case argued before the court involves family-owned companies such as Hobby Lobby that are willing to provide health insurance for employees but oppose covering certain methods of birth control like the Plan B pill, which they say violates their religious beliefs. The judges appeared quite divided on the case. The Obama administration and its supporters say a ruling in favor of the businesses could have a slippery slope effect, which may undermine laws stipulating Social Security taxes, minimum wages, and immunizations. What do you guys think? What takes priority, the ACA mandate or the rights of businesses to act in accordance with their beliefs? Let's get started. Who wants to begin on this? Ryan, I see that you look quite excited.
Oh, sure. I mean, I think it's fairly clear that if an individual doesn't want to be part of or be forced to pay for a procedure which they consider to be abhorrent, that individual should have the right to do that. As far as the slippery slope goes, I mean, we have conscientious objector status for people who want to not serve in the military. And I think it's worth pointing out that places like Sweden and Belgium also make similar exceptions for religious Catholics who don't want to be participatory in what they consider to be a morally reprehensible project. So I think the right of the individual, the business owner in this case, should absolutely take precedence over the ability of the government to regulate and in reality coerce them to pay for a process that they don't believe in.
And yeah, just to be clear too, that they're willing to provide the insurance. It's just certain methods of birth control that they find to be against their religious beliefs. And I know, Alex, you're probably on the other side here, so what say you?
The problem with the right of the business is that religious beliefs are entirely fluid. There's nothing constant about them. There's no way to lock them down as to what is a genuine religious belief founded in text that can be predicted. The slippery slope in terms of minimum wage, Social Security, I don't think that's the issue. I think the larger issue is what happens when a certain religious sect starts disagreeing with immunization, starts disagreeing with blood transfusion and refuses to cover that. What happens when another religious organization decides that they don't want to support gay people, don't want to provide health care for them because they disagree with them and it's on a religious basis? What happens when a religious organization says, I don't want to treat black individuals because they look at the Cain and Abel story and say that they're marked? There's a lot of different ways that you can interpret religion which are problematic, which is why the rights of the business don't matter in comparison to the rights of the individual, especially when that individual is going to be screwed over and could potentially die from non-access to healthcare.
Well, I think Alex is drawing a false analogy here because the exemption would not allow businesses to get out of treating people or from offering health insurance to people. It would get out of covering a process, a medical process. Okay. So whether you're gay or straight or black or whatever, that's not relevant. The process is what is exempted.
But if it's the same justification, though, it's all about the precedent. It's all about the justification. The justification is they have a religious right. If you create that precedent in our court system, what's to stop a future organization from suing someone and saying, there's precedent to support the claim that we don't have to allow gay people and individuals to work for us because we have the religious right as an individual and we decide to pay them. The precedent is now on the books, which is why the courts would defer to that.
But that's not the precedent. The whole reason that we have a court is to be able to narrow down what the issue is, right? Otherwise, we just have a machine that told us what to do. The courts are intelligent enough to decide, first of all, whether or not it's a legitimate religious belief. And if you don't think they're fixed, hold on, let me finish. If they're fixed, then you should read the Baltimore Catechism because that's definitely a fixed text of what religious beliefs have been over the course of at least 500 years. In addition to that, the courts could say that you have a religious objection to a process, right? You don't have a religious objection to another person. That seems to be fairly illegitimate. And I would agree with you that businesses or religious people do not have a right to reject individuals, but they do have a right to not be complicit in a process that they consider to be morally repugnant.
All right, Sarah?
I would definitely agree with Ryan. I think it's the right of the business as a business owner. If it's against what their religious beliefs are, why are we asking them to change those? Why are we asking them to dismiss those just because, you know, it's by the law, whatnot, but I could see where Alex is coming from as far as, like he said, segregating people then, or not accepting of them. But this isn't the case. Again, it's a process which people don't believe in, and I think that they have that right to refuse if it goes against their religious beliefs.
How can you prove a corporation's religious beliefs, though? What if it's just cheaper and therefore a corporation says we'll no longer allow blood transfusions?
That's why we have courts to make those determinations. It's not like it's an automatic.
No, that's a political question. That would never be, you would never be able to declare intent. Courts don't do that. Courts determine whether or not you acted on it.
We have the ability to set up administrative mechanisms to set out a fact-finding issue that if there's just a CEO who suddenly became religious overnight in order to save healthcare costs.
Born-again Christians pop up all the time.
Right. Well, there would have to be some kind of regulation, I agree, to protect against that. But to say that we are incapable of doing that is just not, it's not taking into account the relevant political tools we have to decide decisions like these.
So that takes away the arbitrariness of it, because
right.
the court is
I
able
agree
to
that there
decide.
should be protections, right? And I think that we have the mechanisms to protect individuals against corporations who are just trying to opt out of religious plans. And additionally, I think that we have the ability to produce plans that are riders where you pay a little bit more if you want Plan B coverage, and the employer takes up the rest, right? And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that's the way it is in Belgium. Your plan goes up a little bit more. I'm talking like $5 or $6. In addition to the employee contribution, which doesn't cover that.
Okay.
So that allows the religious people to get out of the system which they believe is morally repugnant, and the people who would like the insurance for Plan B or whatever abortion processes they think they might need in the future, they get the ability to access those through their insurance. I mean, there is a compromise position here. Okay. This is a political position that's been pushed on American people. It's a false choice.
Alvin, I'd like to know what you think. What takes precedence? Is it the religious beliefs or is it the ACA? What do you think about that?
I think that this perhaps is like thinking both ways. I can kind of see where you're coming from, like if they have a belief and then they don't want to take it. But I also can see what you were saying about earlier, like what stops people from
The slippery slope effect?
The slippery slope, like what stops people from, like if you say that one way, you don't want to do this one, what's to stop people from saying, I don't want a blood transfusion, like you said earlier. And what you're saying, it's just interesting because I think I can see kind of both ways of what you're saying. I must admit, I kind of agree with you a little bit more, just sort of thinking about like what would happen what would you do? Like, if you have somebody had this one, what's to stop them from doing other beliefs? Say, we don't want to do certain people or certain ways. What's to stop them from trying to go that way? Because they see a precedent. They see this working one way, and then they can go to other ways. That's what I think about it so far.
Well, I think it's also a process. It's also a process where there should be protections, there should be options. Apparently, like you said in Belgium, they have the option if they want to contribute to that, they can. So I think that giving people options and alternatives is also helpful.
I think it's kind of laughable to think that that option would ever be available. There's no way that a bill is going to pass out of Congress that's going to get any Republican support in terms of healthcare unless it tries to eliminate the bill. So there's no way that any legislation will ever come out of it. Additionally, all of these solutions that you're coming up with unfairly discriminate against women, because women are the ones who pay the higher insurance rates. Every bit of contraceptive goes towards women. So the people that get screwed over by this, that's
their
Sarah,
choice. I think as a woman, it's your choice if you want to take contraception.
Absolutely your choice to be a woman.
So, if you want like contraceptions, you have that option. Whether you want to use them or not, there are alternative methods. Condoms, how much are condoms? That you don't need
Those
to
are
have
always effective.
Insurance. Okay, not always, but at the same time, I think if women have the option, I also think that they should be paying for it. I don't necessarily agree that it should be completely covered by their healthcare insurance.
You also don't need, an act of Congress to get this. I can get a dental writer tomorrow for my insurance company. You should be able to have the same kind of cafeteria selection options available to you when it comes to birth control. This solves both problems. I do think that women will disproportionately bear the $5 increase that this rider might do, but there are men whose wives are covered who will end up paying some of that too under their insurance policies, right? So I think that you might have an argument there, but similarly there are processes, with men's bodies, right, that there could be potential riders for that they would bear the cost
Such
for.
as?
Prostate cancer. I can't think of
Those
one
are already
immediately,
covered,
right?
though,
I don't
'cause
know.
there's no religious
Cialis,
protection.
right? Viagra, impotence. Those seem to be like issues which other health, which would be like, we're not covering your Cialis, dude. Okay, I'll get a $10 rider. You know what I mean? I think that there are issues that cut both ways in that regard.
But I think what you were saying about earlier, you said like those were issues, but like he was saying earlier, like with prostate cancer, those are like more health Like this one, you're dealing with more of the religion, then you bring in the religion. That just seems to bring a whole nother aspect into it.
It's also an interesting question, like who determines the religious of an organization? Is it 51, or of a company, is it 51% of the board? What if 1% disagrees?
What about family-owned companies such as Hobby Lobby? Because we're specifically addressing like a very family-based company like Hobby Lobby that is a smaller corporation in comparison. So how would you address that?
Well, in terms of just the small corporation, I still think there's a big concern that they're not directly providing the coverage. It's not to say that you get your contraceptives from Hobby Lobby. They're paying a private corporation who then is giving the healthcare coverage to the individual. It if it's been more beneficial for society for that health coverage to exist, I don't think a religious priority should take precedent, especially when there are many other things that this would also cover. It's not just about contraceptives. It's about blood transfusions. It's about vaccinations. It's about a lot of things that rely on pseudoscience to justify them not being in existence that could potentially be taken out of the availability for women.
So then let's just take the religious aspect out of this entirely, right? The people who believe that they don't need blood transfusions can opt out of that, and they're not going to make a huge difference on the risk pool, right? But then if you allow a measure of choice in terms of what you want your health insurance policy to cover, like I said, with additional riders or with some kind of options about I would like this coverage but not this coverage and this coverage, if you increase the market availability to then companies can say, well, we would like to provide contraceptive coverage as part of our package.
Why would a corporation not be able, or why would a company such as Hobby Lobby not be able to block the option of purchasing the rider? Because they're already subsidizing such a large amount of it. If they're subsidizing majority of your healthcare coverage, why do they not also have the right, because of their religious beliefs, to block you from having the option to receive contraceptives?
Right, because I don't think that's their argument. Their argument is...
Well, it hasn't been applied, but it could logically be applied.
It can't be. I mean, it could be logically applied in a world where you're out of control, right? Like, the Hobby Lobby's objection is they don't want to pay for this. No, not at all. They don't want to pay for it. It's not that you can't take birth control, it's that you can't make me pay for your birth control. And so that's the differentiation between the argument that you just stated and the objection that people like Hobby Lobby have.
You don't just buy healthcare coverage for contraceptives. You buy an overarching plan,
right,
which includes contraceptives. There's no plan like that exists. So they would have to you only pay a portion of the entire plan, which already includes contraceptives. Only you are paying for that portion. So Hobby Lobby is still paying for the entire plan, minus the portion that is contraceptives,
right,
but they still control the entire plan, though.
Yeah, so
so you could, from a religious argument, you could say, I disagree with this. I'm not funding any of what would include contraceptives, even if you're not directly subsidizing it. You could block a rider.
Right. Well, I wouldn't agree with that position, right? My only argument is that people who are religious have a right not to participate in actions which they find morally reprehensible. This is not the same thing as the situation you just described. You have to make it available for people who want it. It's the law, right? At this point anyway. At the point where you're saying, I'm not going to make it available to you, even if you're willing to pay for it on your own accord, then that's a problem.
All right, guys. Now, we will continue to discuss this, I guess, as the case continues to evolve. We're going to take a quick break, and we're going to come back talking about GM and their automobile ignition switch recall. Stay with us.
Change the skin they were born with and say they die for darker skin. Sadly, some actually do. Change your thinking, not your skin. Stop tanning. Learn more at spotskincancer.org.
Help support the Breast Cancer Patient Education Act, a bill that will help make sure women facing a mastectomy are told all their options about breast reconstruction. Visit broaddayusa.org for more information.
Welcome back from the break. Our next topic today has left grieving families as well as members of Congress demanding answers from the American automobile giant General Motors. The company has recalled 2.6 million cars for the faulty ignition switch that has been linked to 13 deaths. GM's new CEO, Mary Barra, was called to testify before Congress yesterday. National Highway Traffic Safety Administration Committee Chairman Fred Upton of Michigan said GM, as well as government regulators, got complaints about the ignition switches 10 years ago, yet only recently issued the recall. Now the question remains, what took so long? Well, documents provided by GM show that money may have been a factor. The company deemed the 57-cent cost to correct the problem to be a, quote, unacceptable cost increase. The latest automobile scandal comes on the heels of the landmark Toyota case that resulted in a $1.2 billion fine for the automaker. Families of victims are demanding action against GM, as well as stiffer legislation to prevent further cases of this nature. So what do you guys think? Do we need to put more pressure on the auto industry? What should be GM's punishments? Alvin, let's start with you on this one. What do you think about this?
They should be punished a lot because if we read what happened in the case, they said like, was it like 13
people
died
so far.
And there are a lot of youth of them. I mean, this is a car that they said were cheap cars, that these were for people that
they were
just
Cobalt, so they were more of like a compact car,
right.
like
And then
said.
if you see like what happened, and it's such a tragic, like, when the ignition just like fails, and then just such a scary situation that if they really saw what was going on, and they really saw like what's in the memo, if that was true what they saw, then yeah, they should really be punished. Yes, I understand this is a new CEO. Yes, that's everything. But still, you have the CEO. You're the boss. The buck stops with you. If something goes wrong, you have to do something with it. You just can't say, no, it was not my fault. It was the previous administration. You gotta say, yes, I have to try and make mistakes. And it's such a, if it wasn't fatal, I would not have been so harsh on them. But I said, since there was fatalities and they were the youth,
right.
They really should go all the way. They should get sued liables, and they should go after them.
So I want to ask you, do you think it comes down to the dollars and cents why it took them so long to issue this recall?
If this was 10 years ago when it was first brought up, I'm just surprised that they took this long to even come out and take action. I think it's ridiculous almost, and I do think they should be held accountable. I think they're definitely responsible for it. It's been 10 years for them to not have done anything thus far for a cost of the 57 cents is, I think, ridiculous.
Alex, what do you think about this? Do you think that the automobile bailout has anything to do with this? Should we hold GM more accountable because they received money from us?
I'm not sure why the bailout has anything to do with this. I do, though, think this speaks more largely to why corporations shouldn't have nearly as much rights as individuals, because corporations are inherently driven by profit motive and have to respond to investors. When making decisions that respond directly to those investors, you have to make decisions that what is cheaper. It was cheaper for them not to do a recall than it was for them to pay out anybody who died, any potential litigation. They could have just bought you out as opposed to simply having the recall and losing a bunch more money. So it makes a lot more sense from that perspective to just kind of wait it out, and tragically it cost a lot of people to die.
But that's a bad decision making. If you're the guy at GM, you have to think, man, how long am I going to be able to keep this a secret? And the
10 years.
Right, the moment one person dies, that means it's no longer cost effective, right? The moment that the secret comes out, it's no longer cost effective. And the person at GM who made this decision just made a bad, like the value on GM's share is going to go down, right? They're going to have to pay $1 billion fine is what Toyota paid, something in that ballpark. They're probably going to be open to liability suits, right? This is a much more expensive option. The cheaper option for GM in the long run, to anyone who has any kind of good decision-making skills, is pay the 50 cents, issue the recall, right? That's the long-term value to stock strategy. So I agree that there should be, I actually think because they took bailout money, there should have been greater transparency in their business operations because they're no longer a totally private corporation at that point. The people hold stock in them. But there should be greater transparency, and they should be held accountable for this.
This was long before the bailout. I feel like bringing the bailout into this is just kind of like political pandering. But
I'm going to give you the last opportunity to just address what he said as far as a dollar and cents, and then we'll move on to the next topic.
Oh, well, now they have the chance to rebrand. This is hardly like, this is not going to kill GM. GM has now a chance to put out a bunch of new cars and say, we fixed all the problems, here's our new model. Come purchase it, and they'll be fine coming out of it. It's like sad.
Toyota was able to do that, so I guess it remains to be seen how GM will handle this. But I really want to move to our last topic of the day. So the last topic I want to touch on today brings to light the role of school administrators and their interactions with parents. This tricky dynamic was recently questioned right here in our backyard. In December of last year, a student at White Middle School in Henderson committed suicide. 13-year-old Haley Lamberth mentioned bullying in her farewell note. Her father, Jason Lamberth, was unaware of the bullying situation. In fact, school officials told Lamberth there was no record of his daughter being bullied prior to her suicide. Well, Lamberth believed it until an anonymous tipster suggested Lamberth obtain his daughter's disciplinary record from the middle school. The record showed his daughter was indeed harassed exactly 3 weeks before she took her own life. Now, the school district has a website, Say No to Bullying, that is designed to uncover bullying in school via anonymous tips, which received a tip about Haley's situation. Now, Nevada law requires principals to investigate tips within 24 hours and provide written notice to parents. This did not occur in Lamberth's case. There's no telling whether this information could have prevented her suicide. However, it brings into question the responsibility of schools, teachers, and administrators to report bullying behavior to parents. So what do you guys think? What role should the school play in bullying cases? I guess, Ryan, let's start with you on this one.
I mean, it should be, as in all things, secondary to the parent's role. I mean, the kid is still your kid, right? Because you drop them off doesn't mean that those 6 or 7 hours, or maybe even 8, depending on what they do, disappear from the day. I mean, if you're going to be an involved, proactive parent and your kid's being harassed constantly and you don't know about it, that's a problem on a number of different angles, right? You should be as involved in your kid's life as anything else you've got going on. And while I do think the school has an obligation to confront bullying and to create a safe atmosphere, that's not where it ends, right? It has to extend outside of the school to the parents, to the families, and to the community. I also don't think that an anonymous tip website is probably the best way to go. You know, like if that opens the door to bullying because I don't have to expose myself, right? Okay. If I want to bully Alex, I'll tell the authorities anonymously that he bullied me, and then he'll be the one that goes into the office and has to get, you know, not interrogated, but questioned about how he was bullying me, even though that never happened. And then my plan to bully him has worked miraculously, and I have it can't be traced back to me.
I think it stands on, or at least goes back to both the parenting and the schools. I mean, nowadays I feel like, at least for my generation growing up, bullying it's always been around. Whether there's more now than there was before, whether we're more prone to it now. I don't know how the schools specifically deal with it now. And I came from private education all through my even undergraduate life, and never once did we have an issue with this where it wasn't dealt with, where the parents weren't contacted. So I think it relies on both the parents and the school as well, for the school not to contact the parent after their child is being bullied, and what consequences are there for the bully? Like, do we know, are there any, if any, what's being done? I mean, are they getting away with this? So that's, I think, another issue that needs to be brought up.
Alex, I want to ask you, what's the role of the school in this dynamic?
Oh, I think the school has a very influential role. I think the only reason that this case is as big of an issue as it is because the child comes from a family who is massively invested in their future. That's the reason why they requested records after the suicide. That's the reason why they contacted the school beforehand and during, because they had an interest in the student. A lot of the times, though, the parent is not as invested as we'd all hope. And ideally, it would start with the home, but not every student or child is as lucky as that. So instead, we need to have the school proactively reach out and try to contact parents. I mean, I think, like, I come from a private school background as well. From what you're speaking of, kids that go to private school typically have a foundation which is very supportive, but not everyone is that lucky, which is why the school needs to kind of step up their game and actively reach out. As far as the like anonymous tips thing, like you sound like a very strategic bully, but I don't think as many bullies are as strategic as you are, Ryan. I think that
I don't know.
There might be an issue with the way, let's say a student does alert a teacher in front of other students, that kid's now the new target. So I think that there is some plus to it being anonymous, but I don't think that's the only avenue by which students should try to, out a bully.
I want to ask you, Alvin, do you think that dealing with bullying issues distracts schools and administrators from their purpose of academics?
I think it does. Like, I feel like that with the bullying, it's a really big issue, but I'm thinking like what you said earlier, like it's been going on for so long that right now that we're bringing all this fuss about it, I personally don't really think it as big a deal as we're making it out to be. Yes, it is a big deal, but I feel like you're blowing out proportion that yes, it's bullying, yes, it's very tragic, I'm sorry about it, but I feel like that we're just making so much more about it that we're just putting all this pressure onto it. Ultimately, it is really up to the family whether or not, yes, the school can help, but the school job, main role is not to try to prevent bullying. The school main role is to educate them. If they helped out with bullying, as well there's a good teacher there that wants to help them out on their own time, yes, that's fine. But to require a principal and everything when they have so many kids, remember, they're not just responsible for that one kid, they're responsible for all the kids. So why should this one get more special treatment as opposed to the others?
I don't think special treatment. I think that it's important for everyone to get special treatment. I mean, if I had a child and they were getting bullied, I would, sure want to know about it. I think it is a responsibility on the school as well. And you brought up the point of educating them. Well, you educate the students, you're educating them to stop the bullying as well. You're having more programs and people are being more proactive because of all the suicides now that we're aware of. I mean, who knows if they were going on 10 years ago, 20 years ago, or what the statistics on that was before. But I think it's important to educate them as well and inform the parents. I think it is a priority and responsibility of the school.
I think there's a big problem. I think there's a big problem with the framing of this question in terms of saying, is there a trade-off between educating students and getting against bullies? That's a big issue. I think that there are people at schools, such as guidance counselors, whose job it is to deal with that. Okay. And kind of like framing it that way almost creates a disincentive for teachers to even deal with a bully.
And if a kid's being bullied constantly, there's no way he's going to be like, let's learn about history today, right? He's going to be like, man, how am I going to avoid my bully? But I think that when we talk about education, it's a one-sided education right now. It's stop bullying, which is true. People should not bully other people. But there's got to be a component that speaks to the bully that says, take a little bit of responsibility for yourself. Don't get pushed around. Be comfortable in your own skin, right? The resources should be available to them so that they become comfortable with themselves about the things that they're bullied about. Like if a kid, as I was called chubby and fat all the time, right? As soon as you get comfortable with yourself, it's a lot harder to bully a kid about that, you know?
I'm going to give you the last word on that one, and we'll address bullying more, I'm sure, in later shows. But that is all the time we have for today. So now you know what we think. Let us know what you think. Share your opinions or any ideas or topics you'd like us to scramble about to thescramble.unlv@gmail.com. You can also catch full episodes of The Scramble at unlv.tv. For all of us here at The Scramble, thanks for joining us, and we hope to see you next time.